look at the complications in the modern conversation about spirituality and consciousness and awakening, I notice a few things that always catch my attention. So one is you'll see people who are spiritual seekers. They'll go to retreats, workshops, they'll read books, and the first thing they almost always say is, you know, I knew that already. I just felt like I was being reminded. Or they'll say to me, oh, I read your book. I loved it. It wasn't totally new to me. And at first I started to feel like that was some kind of like an insult. Like, gosh, haven't I given you anything new? Like, haven't I taught you anything in this book? But what people are really speaking to when they say this again and again, regardless of who they're reading or what their tradition is they're really trying to say that spirituality is not about moving towards something. It's not about becoming something. It's actually about letting go of all the things you are not. It is about remembering. It's about awakening to something that you've been carrying with you all your life. So if someone comes to you and says, oh, I went to this workshop and I didn't learn anything, then I think, great. Did you remember everything? Because that's ultimately what it's really about. But there's another thing that catches my attention, and it has to do with the conversation about spiritual experiences. Because for me, one of the things that I always felt a little bit, you might say, critical or curious as I read different spiritual teachers is a lot of times what I got in their work was philosophy. Here's what the world looks like, and here's how it's constructed, and here's the different levels and layers. But I wanted to know, how did they really know that? I don't want a pencil sketch, and I don't want 5, diagrams. Those are helpful, but only if I understand how you came to it. Did you have an awakening? And did this feel real? Do you know this is truth, or is this just an idea? Well, I think one of the reasons why a lot of spiritual teachers don't talk about experience, and frankly why I think a lot of people don't talk about spiritual experience, is because there is one universal quality that creates a problem. Now, in the academic world, we call this the quality of ineffability. So when you study comparative religion, when you study the teachings of the mystics from an academic perspective, one of the terms we actually use as a hallmark for a mystical experience is that it's ineffable. And what that means is you can't put it into words. And we all know that experience. It's like a joke, and you say, well, you had to be there. Or it's like a vacation. We say, well, I could tell you about it, but you just had to be there. Or sometimes you'll just say, I get it now. And someone will say, what do you mean you get it now? Well, you've been trying to tell me for months about how to do this project, and I get it now. Well, what was the leap? Did you see something? Did you hear something? And they'll say, well, no, I can't put it into words. It's just a feeling. And the challenge with that ineffable feeling, that feeling that we can't put into words, is on one hand, it's a hallmark of mystical awakening or mystical experience, the experience of the ultimate nature of reality. But on the other hand, it doesn't really fly in a society that basically says if we can't measure it, if we can't label it, we don't necessarily believe it exists. And so that's a predicament for a lot of people. Now, science is going to great lengths and coming to great conclusions to help give us some language for this subtle reality, for this sort of sub-manifest world that we can encounter with our eyes closed and our hearts open. But it still remains a mystery, and it still remains elusive. And accepting that mystery, embracing that we will never fully know it, is actually one of the ingredients to knowing it better, to knowing it more. So there's a lot of paradox the closer we get to the truth about the nature of our reality. And that's why so many spiritual teachers, and frankly, modern quantum physics, and even these days astrophysics, starts to sound totally astounding and baffling and almost counterintuitive and sounds counterlogical in a kind of social way, and yet in our hearts, it makes sense.